Now, moving on to the last section, that is, we'll be briefly discussing multiple organ failure syndrome, systemic inflammatory response syndrome, and certain other entities such as tetanus, its management, fat embolism syndrome, its management, and Crutch syndrome and its management. So, what is multiple organ failure? Clinical appearance of seemingly poorly controlled severe systemic inflammatory reaction following triggering event like infection, inflammation, or trauma. Eventually, it starts with systemic inflammatory response to a trauma and eventually precipitates and creates into a vicious cycle leading to multiple organ failure. Initiating events could be due to severe sepsis, such as in case of peritonitis. It could be due to trauma, such as chest injuries and burns. It could be due to shock, such as cardiogenic or hemorrhagic shock. It could be due to surgery events, such as vascular abdominal surgery. And there may be associated medical causes as well, such as pancreatitis and aspiration. Other causes, massive transfusion. Even sometimes when massive transfusion is done, this eventually further leads to disseminated intravascular coagulation leading to multiple organ failure. Or the pathogenesis occur. Pathogenesis through there is actually associated with shock and hypoperfusion. Once the hypoperfusion remains there, there is period of active resuscitation as well. Although the active resuscitation is being carried out to solve this hypoperfusion, but this hypoperfusion remains there for a longer period of time. This leads to stable hypermetabolism or systemic inflammatory response to hyperperfusion of the body, eventually leading to organ failure. So organ involvement in modes could be due to respiratory system, it could be cardiovascular system, it could be GIT or gastrointestinal tract, it could be due to kidneys, or it could be hematological systems as well. But once it sets in, once one organ fails, then it's the next one, then the next one, and eventually multiple organs gets involved as well. So what's the management? The best management is to prevent stage of systemic inflammatory response syndrome, because if we are not going to prevent this continuous hypoperfusion, eventually it's going to set in and leads to multiple organ failures. So we have to aggressively resuscitate so that that state of hypoperfusion is decreased, and then there is a removal of risk factors as well, such as this, what is actually causing hypoperfusion. Then avoidance of hypotensive episodes, because hypotension along with hypoperfusion eventually leads to and there is called as terrible triad of death, which is actually hypotension, hypoperfusion, and acidosis. So there may be associated along with these problems as well. So we have to avoid this terrible triad as well. If it's due to fracture in this trauma, then that will require the fracture stabilization and embolization. If it's due to sepsis, then we require IV antibiotics. And if it's due to this actually hypotension along with the hypoperfusion, you may have to give oxygen delivery, has to be maximized, and patient has to be ventilated. Now, management is mainly supportive treatment. Management of the precipitating causes, what is actually causing hypoperfusion and hypotension, that has to be dealt with. Patient usually requires ventilatory support in form of low tidal volume ventilatory strategies, limited plateau pressures, and oxygenation. And there may be renal or hematological management as well, because we need to prevent renal failure in these patients as well. Now coming further to the management, may also require metabolic syndrome, that we need to prevent acidosis. We may have to go for selective digestive tract decontamination so that this decrease the level of sepsis, non-absorbable antimicrobial agents as well, monoclonal antibodies as well, and maybe TNF inhibitors as well, so that the inflammatory response is actually reduced, and receptor antagonist of interleukin-1 as well. Now, all this will help in decreasing the septic load as well as decreasing the inflammatory response as well, along with aggressive resuscitation, so that hypotension and hypoperfusion can be avoided. This will usually prevent SIRS, eventually leading to multi-organ dysfunction syndromes. Now coming to tetanus, although it's very rare disease, but it is highly debilitating if it occurs. This is due to Clostridium tetani, which is the organism which is involved, and point is usually it grows only in the necrotic tissue and under anaerobic conditions. Exotoxin, which releases a form of exotoxin, which is actually reaches the CNS and leading to convulsions, and muscle spasms. And usually diaphragm and intercostal muscle get paralyzed due to this toxin. Once they get paralyzed, this may actually compromise the breathing and ventilatory mechanism, eventually leading to asphyxia. Now, management. There are two types of management of the tetanus. One is once the patient has suffered from the tetanus, then this requires actually intravenous antitoxins, heavy sedations, because usually this toxin actually irritates the nerve, leading to muscle convulsions and spasms of the respiratory muscles. So they have to be heavily sedated. Muscle relaxant drugs has to be given, and they will require tracheal intubation and ventilation, because usually they have an airway compromise which must be controlled, otherwise patient will die of asphyxia. Now, that other option is actually prevention. One is once the patient has already suffered, and if the patient has not suffered from tetanus, then we have to prevent it from happening. How we can prevent the tetanus? Usually through active immunization. Active immunization is through the use of tetanus toxoid vaccine. And if that is given, then we can give the booster dose usually at 10 years. And at 5 years, only immunoglobulins can also be given. Or if the patient has suffered from some kind of an injury, a minor injury, when there was a necrotic tissue, we have to give antibiotics, and we have to keep that area open as well, so that anaerobic conditions are not given over there, along with the tetanus toxoid vaccine as well. And at 5 years, we can give immunoglobulins as a booster as well. Now coming to the fat embolism syndrome. Fat embolism syndrome is a kind of a problem which usually follows limb fracture, especially the long bone fractures such as the femur and the tibia. Usually it's what has happened is that normally these long bones inside contains a marrow cavity which has a lot of fat in it. These fat globules are actually during the fracture, they are thrown into the blood, eventually leading to fat embolism. Features are similar of the acute respiratory distress syndrome. These features include actually rise of the temperature and pulse rate. There's tachypnea, tachycardia, hyperthermia. There may be loss of consciousness as well, and breathlessness as well. Mild mental confusion may be present as well. PO2 of the patient may be less than 60 kilopascals. There may be associated with petechiae on the trunk and axilla, and respiratory distress, and eventually the mental problem may be so much the patient may be in form of a coma if it is huge shower of the emboli actually go into the respiratory system. Management is always supportive. If the patient wants, usually with the patient who having a long limb fractures, they must be on the watch for the development of fat embolism. The treatment is usually high inspired oxygen concentration usually after injury, and stabilization of long bone fractures along with the fluids. Fluids must be given so that the kidneys flush out these fat globules as quickly as possible. With the fixation of fracture is of the paramount importance, because if we are not going to fix the fracture, these fat globules from the bone marrow will continue to go into the bloodstream. Eventually, this process will never end, and eventually the patient will never come out of the fat embolism. And how we can optimize is through the ventilation perfusion match in the lungs. VQ scan can be done, but usually oxygen is given, patient is ventilated, fluids are given, and bones are fixed. And fixing the bones actually reduces the chances of developing fat embolism. Now coming to the crush syndrome. Crush syndrome could be due to trauma, in which there is a traumatic rhabdomyolysis, that the limb is crushed so much that actually the muscles are crushed under the weight and eventually leads to necrosis. Or this could be due to even seen when the limb is compressed for extended periods, but also after the prolonged use of pneumatic anti-shock garments as well. Although it's very rare with them, but yes, it can occur with that as well. For example, there was earthquake, the patient got trapped under the tripod, her leg was trapped under a lot of weight, and eventually leads to this kind of a situation, can lead to crush syndrome. Usually the limb is underperfused, there is myonecrosis, and there is membrane damage as well. This myonecrosis actually results in a rhabdomyolysis. Rhabdomyolysis can be damaging because this can eventually ensue renal failure. So it is important that capillary failure and reabsorption failure occurs usually in these kind of patients. Treatment important is to prevention. If the patient it has happened, then what we can do is we can use alkalinization of the urine. Why? Because sometimes it's associated with acidosis as well. There's rhabdomyolysis, there's traumatic injury, there's renal failure, and acidosis. So acidosis can be prevented by use of alkalizing the urine by use of sodium bicarbonate. The renal hemofiltration is important because these myonecrosis eventually this rhabdomyolysis results in plugging of the renal arterioles, eventually leading to renal failure. So renal hemofiltration is important, and we have to do renal hemofiltration if the patient is undergoing oliguria or renal failure. As you know that now once the muscle necrosis has occurred, this will eventually lead to edema, and this will lead to intracompartmental pressure that will increase and eventually may ensue a compartment syndrome. So the fasciotomy are also done so that the compartment syndrome can be prevented, so that does not precipitate further myonecrosis. Other option is excision of dead muscles, because if the muscle has been dead, now it has to be removed. You cannot keep the dead muscle inside the body, otherwise it will continue to create more problems. That is because it's going to be increase more septic load. It will be other problems as well. So the treatment is basically of the crush syndrome is giving fluids, giving alkalizing the urine, managing the renal failure, and managing the compartment syndrome, so that it's kind of a supportive treatment, and patient may require an intensive care treatment as well at times. Now coming to a very rarely things, that is intensive care unit scoring systems. Nowadays patients are having suffering from massive kind of a trauma, and sometimes this may require ventilator support as well. So ICU scoring systems are good because they are helpful in audit of the patients, and they are helpful in research. We know what should be done and how to clinically manage things which is especially associated with massive trauma. So these scoring systems include acute physiological and chronic health evaluation, simplified acute physiology care, mortality prediction model, therapeutic intervention scoring systems, and sequential organ failure assessments. Although there are multiple systems involved, you cannot say that all are good or all are bad, although every system has its pros and cons. But we need to analyze this, so that because we need to improve our health facilities, improve our intensive care unit, and to improve our other facilities as well, we need to have this system so that we can monitor our patients. We know that how much health we have delivered to them and how much they lack, and how we can improve our intensive care units. And although all these systems have certain limitations, but one must keep in mind that these intensive care units are now working on a unified system, so that which may eventually come into play, and so that we can monitor all intensive care on one scale. In this section, we have briefly gone through the management of certain parameters such as crush syndromes and tetanus toxoid, tetanus infection, and fat embolism. Primarily, the treatment of tetanus is basically prevention. That is by the use of tetanus toxoid vaccine, which can be given after every 10 years. Boosters can be given, and the use of immunoglobulins after every 5 years. Fat embolism syndrome is usually associated with long bone fractures, and its primary treatment is actually the prevention of fat embolism by using stabilizing the fractures as early as possible. And then we've briefly gone through the crush syndrome, although it can be associated with trauma, but it can occur due to anti-shock garments as well. The treatment in the crush syndrome is actually the prevention of renal failure, prevention of acidosis by alkalizing the urine, and prevention of compartment syndrome, where we can go for fasciotomies for that. Thank you very much. Keep watching sqadia.com.